So, a quiet, slow Tuesday after the Cleveland Browns came back from London and going to rest up here a little bit and start the week for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Andrew Berry says otherwise. Surprise move today in the NFL. Cleveland Browns have traded veteran quarterback Joe Flacco to the Cincinnati Bengals, along with a sixth-round pick in 2026 for a fifth-round pick in the 2026 NFL Draft. Shedeur Sanders elevated to quarterback number 2. Browns 3D on the OBR streaming network. Let's talk about it. Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound Browns 3D on the OBR streaming network. I am your host, Jeff Lloyd, and we appreciate each and every one of you for all the support you give us here at the OBR, whether it is the best Cleveland Browns written content there is over at the OBR.com. While you were there, certainly look into the VIP access, insider forums. Of course, ask the insiders. Your subscription gets bundled with Paramount Plus come January, all the UFC you can possibly digest. And for everybody who comes out every evening and joins us and supports us here on the OBR streaming network, beginning at 6 o'clock with Browns 3D. You got the gang of 3 last night, Pete, Lane, and of course, Barry McBride. Tonight, you will have Pete and Joe. I'm sure they will continue to break down, of course, the Sunday game in London. Browns lose to the Vikings, as we all know, and probably dig a little bit deeper in the Cleveland Browns moving Joe Flacco to the Cincinnati Bengals. Yes, the headline story for today. The Cleveland Browns have traded Joe Flacco to the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals now give up a fifth-round pick in 2026. The sixth-round pick the Cleveland Browns are giving up in the 2026 NFL Draft, along with Joe Flacco, belongs to the Detroit Lions. So obviously a pick that's going to end up being way down in round 6. The way the Bengals are playing, we'll see what Joe Flacco does. But this certainly could be a pick that ends up being on the higher end, certainly, of round 5. The fact, and this is nothing to do personally with Joe Flacco, how Joe Flacco played, any of that. The Cleveland Browns just got a draft choice for a guy who is going to be 41 years old in January. This is what the Cincinnati Bengals just traded for. The other irony of this is Jake Browning, who is currently, or I should say was currently, the starting quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals, leads the NFL in interceptions. Number 2 in the NFL in interceptions is newly acquired Joe Flacco. Now, when the Browns put this whole quarterback room together, and my time at the OBR began in January, and when we started here in January, the conversations were the Cleveland Browns are going to do everything they can. They're going to turn over every rock, look under every couch cushion, and do everything they possibly can to find a long-term solution at the quarterback position. And we preface that by saying they are not going to find a long-term answer at the quarterback position during the 2025 offseason. They got together, put some work in, the Kenny Pickett trade, signed Flacco shortly before the draft Dylan Gabriel in the 3rd round, draft Shedeur Sanders in the 5th round. And that was your quarterback room for 2025. And I know there's been a lot of talk about job security, which is always what you guys want to go to. And it's amazing that so many of you are so ready to move on. You finally have some stability with this franchise. You never did. You didn't. You had none. You had zip. You had zero. You had zilch. So now that you have some in a year, and I'm sorry if you guys thought this team was going to be a contender this year, but you really thought with a quarterback room of Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, Dylan Gabriel, and Shedeur Sanders, this was going to be a team that was going to contend in the NFL in 2025? Come on. The other thing, do you really think Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski went into this season with a quarterback room of Joe Flacco, again, Kenny Pickett, Dylan Gabriel, Shedeur Sanders, and did this with any belief that their jobs could possibly be on the line by whatever outcome the 2025 season brings? Again, no. Here was always the thing. Kenny Pickett, and obviously his injuries and just lack of involvement in training camp and certainly within the preseason games, allowed Dylan Gabriel a lot more meaningful reps. Unfortunately, we all wanted Shedeur to get some of those reps. We all know the case. Shedeur didn't necessarily get many of those reps. Then the preseason games came. Pickett, Gabriel were out of the first preseason game. Shedeur Sanders played and played lengthy. And to give him his credit, played well. A couple of mistakes, sure, but played well. Then came week 2, and Shedeur Sanders was unavailable. Dylan Gabriel went out and played pretty well, showed some rookie mistakes, of course. Then week 3 of the preseason came, and Dylan Gabriel looked really good. And Shedeur Sanders, unfortunately, went out there and tried to basically steal the number 2 job by playing out of his mind, and ended up playing out of his mind, and obviously played poorly. And the number 2 position was all but settled that it was going to go to Dylan Gabriel. So you move on from Kenny Pickett. Now, this year should have been mostly about developing young quarterbacks. You're developing youth everywhere. Right now, your number 2, number 3, and number 4 wide receivers. Your number 2 is a rookie. Your number 3 and your number 4 are second-year wide receivers. You have a 4-man running back room on your 53-man roster, 3 of whom are rookies. One of your top offensive weapons right now and leader in targets is a rookie tight end. Yes, it would have been fantastic if there was a quarterback available in the top 5 for the Cleveland Browns to draft, but there just was not. So they ended up doubling down. Now, I don't think Dylan Gabriel's play on Sunday necessarily just says, that's it, he's your starter for the rest of the year. But I think his play on Sunday, and much like somebody said, Dylan Gabriel was going to go out there and be able to give you everything Joe Flacco could, and perhaps even a little bit more. And I would say after one start, I think my statement held true. Now, once you got to Dylan Gabriel, that probably meant not necessarily that the Browns think their season is over, but the Browns think that they are to the part of their schedule where it's maybe a little favorable for either Gabriel, who's now starting, or Shedeur Sanders, who could be starting at some point, for them. They've also now had, for Gabriel, it was 4 weeks. Shedeur, now it's 5 weeks as he moves into the number 2 role. You didn't want to rush these guys out there right out the gate. There's a reason they were both drafted where they were. Gabriel just needed a little time and was going to have to deal with the fact that he was one of the smaller players on the field. Shedeur is continually dealing with the issues he has with pass rush. Now for Gabriel, it's one start in, and did a lot of the things that you ask a rookie quarterback to do in his debut. Don't turn the ball over. Be smart. Be safe. Don't take bad sacks. And he was sacked twice. I guess it was for 8 yards. So Gabriel did pretty much everything you would ask a rookie quarterback to do, considering that he was playing with a whole bunch of young talent around him. The fact of the matter is, once you went to either of the young quarterbacks, whether it was Gabriel or whether it was Shedeur Sanders, you were never going back to Joe Flacco. And again, it's not a knock on Joe. It's nothing personal. But I think the Browns felt that the rookie quarterbacks had basically even and leveled up the playing field Joe Flacco is a very, very intelligent guy at the position at this day and age. Of course, his experience speaks volumes. But if there is one thing that is certainly an issue right now for Joe Flacco, it's just overall athleticism. He's 40, has no movement skills, has very little. So for Joe, once he was pulled initially, that was it. He was never going to get the opportunity back, unfortunately. There is a hole right now in Cincinnati. I don't know if anybody truly knows what the deal is with Joe Burrow. I think the Bengals think if there's a possibility they are in it, there's a possibility Joe Burrow can play again in 2025. I don't know if we'll ever even get to know whether or not that scenario is going to play out the way the Bengals have been playing the last few weeks. But just like everybody said for the Cleveland Browns to start the season, well, you got to be true to your veterans. That's why we're going to start Joe Flacco or Kenny Pickett. Da, da, da. And I don't disagree with it. I don't. That's the exact same reason the Cincinnati Bengals made this move today. You saw Jamar Chase at times over the last few weeks. You saw T. Higgins over the last few weeks. It's really difficult when you play with a guy like Joe Burrow and he goes down and goes down yet again for a significant amount of time. The whole team is built on him. The whole premise of how the team is built around Joe Burrow. The reason guys like Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are still there is because of Joe. But you're the Cincinnati Bengals, and you're kind of cash strapped. And you're paying your quarterback a cajillion dollars. You're paying Jamar Chase a cajillion dollars. You're paying T. Higgins a good, large amount of money. You're paying Hendrickson a good, large amount of money. You certainly do not have the monetary assets to invest into a backup quarterback. So here came something, and this is very, very similar to how Joe Flacco became a Brown in 2023. Here was somebody that you felt was an upgrade at the position and kind of just fell into your lap as far as being available. So Joe is going to take the ride down. I guess it's I-71. I forget. I'm not good yet on my Ohio highways, but we'll travel on down from Cleveland, of course, to Kentucky. I mean, Cincinnati. And the hopes from the Cincinnati Bengals are that Joe Flacco will be ready to start on Sunday in Green Bay. Whew. So you admire Joe at this point in his career. And this is, I mean, I definitely think that this is a sign that this is probably it for Joe Flacco in 2025. You want to go out playing, especially with where Joe's kids are now age-wise, very much into the sport, play the sport. Didn't get to see essentially dad's glory days, but at least get to see him go out there and, can he be the answer for the Cincinnati Bengals? My belief is no. Their offensive line is bad. And at least Jake Browning had some mobility. My belief is that there'll be a game or two where the Bengals look good and block well enough. And Joe if you give Joe the time and you have some proven receivers like the Browns did in 2023, I think Joe could still go out and sling the pill around the field a good amount of it. And I think there's a good chance Joe Flacco can probably have a little success with the Cincinnati Bengals. Whether that translates into wins, I'm not necessarily sure, because you have to factor in the Joe Flacco turnover factor, which just followed Joe at every aspect of his career. So now, if you are the Browns It appears that Dylan Gabriel is now currently your number one quarterback for the foreseeable future. Shador Sanders now gets elevated to number two. I'm assuming Bailey Zappi would be the three. Do the Browns take him right onto the 53-man roster? Maybe. Do the Browns look at another young quarterback just to bring in here and, kind of have around? And do not, and nobody believe this for a second, that this is any type of indictment whatsoever on Deshaun Watson. Anybody I can talk to, anybody that I have the ability to reach out to, kind of just chuckle when it comes up. There's been times I have the same amount of probability at a chance to play in 2025 for the Cleveland Browns as Deshaun Watson does. Deshaun Watson is going to continue to get his money. He's going to continue to cash his checks. But he is as far away as possible from ever taking a snap for the Cleveland Browns, at least in 2025. I've heard the same on 2026, but we'll get to that when we get to that. And I don't think, again, that this was just something that Gabriel showed on Sunday, and that's it. The Browns said, you know what? We're good. Dylan Gabriel's the guy. I think what the Browns saw on Sunday is they said, you know what? We like what we saw. We think there's enough to work with here. And now it's time to get a true on evaluation of Dylan Gabriel and hopefully a better evaluation of Shador Sanders throughout the rest of the 2025 season before we get into the 2026 offseason. And we all have a really good idea, with Cleveland holding 2 first-round picks in this year's draft, about what the Browns' intentions just might be. But you want to give these guys a shot. You want to at least let them go out there and play. It's not unheard of for a third-round pick or a fifth-round pick at the quarterback position to find themselves into some sort of run as a starter in this league. Not usually sustained, not usually long, but there's a chance. And I think, and as much as we talked about, there was always that thought that Joe Flacco had to play or Kenny Pickett had to play, so you could kind of appease the veterans on this team and making them believe, that this season was going to be real. You were going to give it a real shot. I think when you walked off that field on Sunday, you're not BSing players, man. You're not. I think what these guys saw of Dylan Gabriel on Sunday, and now I am talking about the veterans on this team, saw a young man who came in prepared, ready to go, committed, excited about the opportunity, and went out and played smart football. You can critique it all you want. And, certainly the video can tell you what Dylan Gabriel did or did not miss. He wasn't perfect. Never said he was. Not going to claim that he is. But would you rather an almost 25-year-old or 23-year-old Shador Sanders getting their chance to at least prove their worth, maybe in a starting capacity, or maybe just part of a younger, sustainable quarterback room? Everybody talks about, the jersey of starting quarterbacks. Imagine what the jersey would look like of guys who didn't start for the amount of quarterbacks the Cleveland Browns have had in the facility. Probably just the last 6 years. Revolving door as far as the quarterback room for the Cleveland Browns. So it makes all the sense in the world. Again, the amount of youth on the offensive side of the ball for the Cleveland Browns, and certainly a good amount of youth on the defensive side of the ball as well. Let them all grow together. I will say it for the millionth time. There is a better chance than not that Dylan Gabriel nor Shador Sanders are the long-term answer at the quarterback position for the Cleveland Browns. Got a big one to watch Saturday night. Indiana, Oregon. Both those guys are definitely extremely high on the quarterback radar for needy quarterback teams, of which the Cleveland Browns are. They need their long-term answer. Stefanski, Barry need to finally find their young signal caller, and that will be the guy who will ultimately determine the fates of Andrew Barry and Kevin Stefanski in Cleveland. Whether it's Mendoza, perhaps more, Lenore Sellers down at South Carolina. But here's also what you're doing if you're the Cleveland Browns. What did we watch them do this year? And certainly on a different scale, with Gabriel being drafted in the 3rd round and Sanders being drafted in the 5th round. They did not rush them. It's becoming one of the largest mistakes in the NFL. Teams are rushing their quarterbacks due to where they are drafted, whether they are ready or not. It hurts the kid. It can certainly hurt the coach. It can certainly hurt the general manager. It's okay to draft a quarterback high in the draft with the understanding that he just might not be day one ready. Now, this is certainly where Gabriel or Sanders and what work they do and what improvements and what growth they make in 2025 could have a lasting impression in 2026. What if the quarterback the Browns draft they feel is not day one ready? Then it could be a Gabriel. Then it could be a Shedeur Sanders. And with the experience that they're getting now during their rookie years, if either one of them got the opportunity to be the starter while the rookie was in waiting in 2026, you can go out there and basically play yourself into the gig by playing well. I said what Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders do in 2025 is not going to stop the Browns from drafting a quarterback with one of those 2 first-round picks in 2026. I didn't say it was going to shut the door 110% completely on either one of them in Cleveland. They're going to get the chance to compete. And for Gabriel and Sanders, they'll have a 1-year leg up. They'll have over 13 games. So there's 12 left. Gabriel's already got a full one under his belt and played, obviously, in the loss to the Lions and played a little bit in the loss to the Ravens. Sanders, you got to feel that there's a time, unless Gabriel goes on a crazy run and the Browns find a way to make some noise and be competitive with this AFC, there's going to be a time for Shedeur. So as far as moving Flacco today, I think it was a nice gesture. I think it was the correct thing to do. We haven't heard necessarily how this all came to pass. You know, I don't know if it was necessarily something that Joe's camp was hearing. It does kind of bring you back, though, to Halloween a few years ago. A.J. McCarron maybe getting traded to the Cleveland Browns, and there was fax machine issue. With the Cleveland Browns and the Cincinnati Bengals did, in fact, make a trade today. And I am not even going to lie to you. I went through social media for probably a good 45 seconds to a minute to make sure what I saw and I read was actually true. I don't know who else may have been available for the Bengals. I know everybody was trying to clamor for Jameis Winston. They just, wanted to get into that Jameis and Jamar storyline. I'm not sure if Jameis wasn't available or maybe Jameis isn't looking to leave New York as he's, kind of planting seeds in what's going to be the next aspect of his life. But Joe, who committed to play very early in the offseason in regards to the 2025 season, will get to continue to play, at least for the foreseeable future, depending on how he can actually do for the Cincinnati Bengals. That Browns quarterback room just certainly got really young really fast, though, right? You went from, 40-year-old Joe Flacco to almost 25 Dylan Gabriel and 23 Shedeur Sanders. And most likely, as we all believe, Bailey Zappi probably coming to the roster, maybe. It's not that the kids aren't ready to compete. The question is, are the kids ever going to be are the kids ever going to be able to compete at a high enough level to be considered a legitimate starter in the NFL? I certainly have high amounts of doubt that either one of them will show a level that's going to basically get them handed the keys to the Cleveland Browns offense. Doesn't mean we're all not going to sit here and watch and hope and anticipate. And I think that's the thing that kind of really turned me off about this last week or so. And look, I have all the faith in the world in Shedeur Sanders as well, as far as physically throwing the ball. But if you can't handle pass rush, we got a serious problem. But it seemed like Dylan Gabriel, who for a million reasons seems nothing but likable, seems just like a good overall kid, appreciative for the opportunities. He's been at 3 different schools. All his teammates spoke glowingly in regards to Dylan Gabriel. And I think just because he's a tad bit undersized, everybody just hates him. It's the craziest thing. And look, there were guys, Zach Jackson, Darryl Ryder, who said training camp didn't go well. And there's no reason to believe that those guys weren't giving you their honest opinions at the time. And they were. They were just having fun at Dylan Gabriel's expense. Training camp didn't go so smooth for Dylan Gabriel. But once you got into preseason games, I think things picked up for Dylan Gabriel. And all the accolades and all the things that the Cleveland Browns like about him, his work ethic, his intelligence, started to show up in his play. He may not be the biggest, he may not be the strongest, he may not be the fastest, but he's going to prepare like there's no tomorrow. He's going to work his ass off, and he's going to do everything he can to be the best version of himself. He's the kind of guy you root for. And other than a rocket arm and maybe just a little bit more bravado and cockiness, Dylan Gabriel technically isn't that different from the guy that you all are clamoring about who plays now for Tampa Bay. But I told you a million times never to run him out of Cleveland, even though he needed it, in Baker Mayfield. Your big news of the day. Cleveland Browns have traded Joe Flacco to the Cincinnati Bengals. They also trade a 2026 sixth-round selection that belonged previously to the Detroit Lions, so obviously figures to be a pick in the lower end of round 6. The Browns get back a 5th-round pick in the 2026 NFL Draft. And judging on the way the Bengals have looked, That could be a very favorable pick for Cleveland. Could also be a pick swap of maybe 40 or so slots in the draft for a now 40-year-old quarterback who was benched by the Cleveland Browns. We appreciate all of you for the support here at the OBR, whether it's the OBR.com. Again, the best Cleveland Browns written content there is. Check out the Insider package, the Insider forums, Ask the Insiders. Your subscription gets bundled with Paramount Plus. And for everybody who supports us here at the OBR streaming network, we could not be more thankful. You had the gang of three after Browns 3D last night. Of course, Barry, of course, and Pete and Lane. And then tonight you'll get Pete and Joe. I believe 7:30 or 8 o'clock. They'll kick that off. I'm sure they'll go much deeper on the Flacco deal, much deeper on the Sunday loss against the Vikings. And until tomorrow, this has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. Browns 3D on the OBR streaming network.